I can't see a thing, Jim.
Well, hold on.
I swear, it's always some damn thing. Wait, got it. Ah, hell, this thing ain't gonna hold.
Shut up.
Damn, you're ugly.
You girls strapped in nice and tight now. Tighter than your mama leg. That's a good one, Mick. Locked in and cruising.
What you got for me out there, Joey Ray?
We got Terra for sure. I don't know about the rest. We got a big old buttload of floating debris out here.
Woo-wee! We hit pay dirt this time for sure. Explain to me, how are we gonna get all this home? I'm detached and moving toward the derelict spacecraft.
Damn it, Jim. Video's out again.
Well, quit picking at it.
I ain't picking at it, damn it. I'm out here with a hinge of my candy up in here and there. Your jacks. Hold on, I got visual. Get the damn boat, you left back! I'm behind the ship! I'm behind you, Jim!
As a kid, I remember walking down to the Future Shop and buying 3 copies of the Battle Chest for my brother, my dad, and I. Since Starcraft is my first Blizzard game, it will always hold a special place in my heart and my memories. Nostalgia aside, I've always liked the story for Starcraft, and it provided a much different feeling than Blizzard's other properties. When it was shown off at E3 in 1996, Starcraft was heavily criticized for simply being a Warcraft in space, and so the project was overhauled, centering around 3 distinct races: the Terrans, the Zerg, and the Protoss. The Warcraft 2 engine would also be redesigned, allowing for special abilities like cloaking and burrowing. When it was finally released in March 1998, it received much more positive reception. The game proved so popular that the game is still played competitively today. The game features a total of 30 missions plus a tutorial mission spread out over each of its 3 races. If science fiction is more of your interest than medieval fantasy, then make sure to subscribe as we work our way through this new series. A number of ships containing death row prisoners was sent into space to become the first colonists on new worlds. After the great carriers crashed onto the planets of Umoja, Moria, and Tarsonis, the survivors awoke and built new civilizations, knowing they would never see Earth again. These initial groups would grow and spread through the Kaprulu sector, becoming the major factions of the Umojan Protectorate, the Kelmorian Combine, and the Terran Confederacy, with the latter of the 3 claiming the greatest military power and becoming the central power in Terran space. The ruling class would become increasingly corrupt and use more violent measures to quell any uprisings that were beginning to emerge, including subjecting Korhal to a nuclear bombardment to make an example out of them. Around this time, a strange alien race was discovered infesting a number of worlds. On the fringe planet Chowsara, the Confederacy would abandon the colonists on the planet to leave them to their fate, only to witness a great golden fleet settle over the planet and incinerate all life from orbit. With fear of colonists breaking out in riots on the nearby Marsara, a new magistrate was sent to prevent a state of panic on the planet. Security has been tightened on the Confederate fringe worlds, and this new magistrate has been given a small number of Marines to defend the colony from incursions from both the strange aliens and from the extremist faction known as the Sons of Korhal. Unfortunately, the entire planet of Marsara has been placed under lockdown, and the magistrate has been given orders by General Edmund Duke of the Alpha Squadron. Within the next 48 hours, the Marsara colonists are to be escorted from their homes into the wastelands. In order to help with the task, the local marshal, James Rayner, has been brought in as an escort. As the colonists fled from the cities, they were attacked by the unknown alien presence, which were held off by Rayner and the Magistrate's Marines. Several SCVs, or Space Construction Vehicles, were brought along to construct a temporary outpost to house the colonists while they awaited further orders. The colonists would be left to the protection of James Rayner, but a distress call from the nearby base of Backwater Station catches his and the magistrate's attention. After contacting Edmund Duke, the two were reassured that the Confederacy had already been alerted to the distress call, and that they would take care of it. Rayner, however, was skeptical of how quickly the Confederacy would act, and so he led a local militia to the base. Along the way, Rayner and the militia encounter more of the strange aliens, and strange living structures that ooze a creeping purple biomass. Whatever these creatures were, their numbers were rapidly swelling across the planet. Reaching the command center, however, presented them with a grotesque sight. The command center was infested by the aliens, and so Rayner ordered his men to burn it to the ground. Although the alien threat was burned out in the area, Duke arrived to arrest Rayner and the militia. Any cries of infestation were fruitless, and so the militia threw down their weapons and surrendered without a fight.
Sarge, why we always gotta listen to this shit for anyway?
'Cause I'm in charge, that's why.
Oh, it don't seem like no good kind of reason to me. Possibly anyway. Hey, what's that?
Hold on right a second.
Swing roller! Looks like you mashed some poor feather's dog, Sarge.
It's a Zerglin, Lester. Smaller type of Zerg. But he can be out this far unless... Oh, shit.
I love you, Sarge.
As it would turn out, the Confederacy was actively avoiding any contact with these alien creatures, which are being labeled as Zerg. Only 2 weeks after the first reported sightings, the Zerg has wiped out 3 colonies and 16 more reported nearby Zerg presence. The magistrate, worried for the colonists, reached out to any outside aid and would be contacted by the Sons of Korhal. Their leader, Arcturus Menks, agreed to help the magistrate evacuate their people, but warned that by helping them, the magistrate would be labeled as an outlaw of the Confederacy. With little other choice, they agree, and the colonists set to work with defending their encampment while they await the dropships. Several hive clusters lay out in the nearby wastes, and so the colonists held strong under the endless waves of Zerg ground forces. Many would be lost, but as the Zerg threatened to overwhelm their defenses, the Sons of Korhal dropships would arrive. They would escape from the planet as the Confederacy pulled their forces back from orbit. Marsara is overrun, and the magistrate is now being put under investigation, but with the colonists evacuated, the magistrate agreed to join Minsk. Rayner would be freed from a nearby prison ship, and the colonists that fled from Marsara would rally around him and join the Sons of Korhal. On the surface of Marsara was a Confederate outpost, and before they left the planet, Minsk asked Rayner to retrieve whatever information he could from their servers. Leading a small force into the Jacobs installation, Rayner would be met with resistance from the base's automatic defenses and from the Alpha Squadron troops still stationed there. Within the installation were holding pens full of Zerg, which the Confederacy seemed to be experimenting on, as well as an encrypted data disk deeper within. With the information in hand, Rayner and his men fled from the outpost, meeting with the transport outside to flee the planet. Only 13 hours after the Sons of Korhal left Marsara, the Great Golden Warships would return and incinerate the planet. The data disks have been taken to one of the moons of Antiga Prime, where their contents are being analyzed. In the meantime, the events that occurred on Marsara weakened the Confederacy's control of the Fringe Worlds, and according to Menk's second-in-command, Sarah Kerrigan, the colonists of Antiga Prime are ready to revolt. Aware of this, Alpha Squadron troops are stationed around the primary colony. Planet-side, Rayner meets up with Kerrigan, and after a bit of banter, the two of them get to work. Equipped with a personal cloaking device, Kerrigan infiltrates the command center at the heart of the Antigan colony, and assassinates the head overseer. The remaining Confederate soldiers were thrown into disarray, and the Antigans fought back with the Sons of Korhal, The Confederates would not be so easily beaten, however, as the bulk of their forces lay just across the river, and when news spread of the revolt, the Confederates mobilized a counteroffensive. They would be shot down as they crossed the water, and a number of dropships carried the rebels into the Confederate base, removing their presence from the area as the rebels tore everything down. With Antigua Prime rebelling against the Confederacy, General Duke himself was tasked with quelling the uprising. However, above the planet's surface, his flagship, the NORAD II, would be intercepted by Zerg and crash into the planet. The ship took heavy damage and crashed into the middle of a large hive cluster, and so as they sent out a distress call, the Sons of Korhal picked up the transmission. Despite protests from both Raynor and Kerrigan, Mengsk ordered that Duke was to be rescued. Raynor would be the one to lead the rescue party, having to send out teams of ground forces to not only kill any Zerg, but also to take out the spore cannons that prevented transport ships from coming to the rescue. When Raynor and the ships finally arrive, Duke remained reluctant to accept their help until Mengsk gave Duke a choice. Remain with a dying Confederacy whose worlds were openly in revolt and overrun with Zerg, or join with the Sons of Korhal and accept a seat in Mengsk's cabinet. Reluctantly, Duke chose the latter. Though it is rare, some Terrans are born with psionic abilities. At a young age, these psionics are taken from their homes and put through brutal training to become special operatives called ghosts. As it turns out, the psionic emanations of ghosts, such as Kerrigan, lure Zerg towards them, and the data disks held blueprints for his psi emitter, which could broadcast that signal across space. Mar Sara was merely a weapons test for this device, and the Confederates' plan was to lure Zerg to their enemies and avoid getting blood on their own hands and having a situation similar to Korhal. As the Sons of Korhal planned to leave the planet, Mengsk decided to turn the weapon against its creators. Sitting on Antigua Prime was a Delta Squadron base, and although reluctantly, Kerrigan was tasked with planting the emitter. Kerrigan led a small force into the heart of the Delta Squadron base and planted the emitter, before pulling her forces back and fleeing the planet. As predicted, the Zerg swarm descended upon the planet, and much like Chow Sara and Mar Sara, the Great Golden Fleet purged all life from the planet. The Confederacy is crumbling in on itself, and now the Sons of Korhal amass an orbit above the capital world of Tarsonis. Even if their order is in disarray, Tarsonis remains heavily defended, and so Mengsk turns to Duke to lead the first assault. Having defended the planet in over 30 major battles, the general knows the planet's defenses and where its weak spots lie. 3 orbital platforms lie above the planet, and by attacking the central platform, a small force will be able to slip through the defenses to the planet below. The platform is defended by the Delta and Omega squadrons, but Duke's Alpha Squadron overpowers them with a full frontal assault, wiping them out in a quick, decisive strike. With the platform cleared, Duke deploys the psi emitter on orders from Mengsk. Both Kerrigan and Raynor are appalled at the deployment of such a weapon, but Mengsk refuses to back down. The Zerg, drawn to Tarsonis, make landfall and proceed to lay waste to the planet. Its major cities and industrial centers are crushed beneath the might of the swarm.
Platform verified and locked. This one's all yours, Hardy.
The Golden Fleet has made landfall near the city of New Gettysburg, and if they're able to gain a proper foothold in the region, they'll be able to destroy the nearby hive clusters, letting the Confederates escape. Menks sends down Kerrigan, and Raynor, at his breaking point, tries to convince Kerrigan that this isn't worth throwing her life away for. Kerrigan, having faith in Menk's plan, moves to defend the hive cluster. The aliens that have been cleansing the Zerg-infested planets are the Protoss, an elder race of psionically gifted beings that have long since warred with the Zerg. The forces that had purified the fringe worlds of the Zerg and were now making their move on Tarsonis is led by Executor Tassadar. Here, however, they were attempting to kill off the Zerg without burning away the Terrans on the planet. As noble as their intentions may be, the Zerg are key to the fall of the Confederacy. However reluctant she may be, Kerrigan leads her forces against the Protoss, while defending themselves from the Zerg at their backs. The Sons of Korhal manage to overwhelm their forces, forcing Tassadar's expedition to retreat off the planet. With the Protoss presence eliminated, the swarm began to move once more across Tarsonis. Kerrigan's forces nestled just near one of the primary hive clusters, radios for an evacuation from the Sons of Korhal, as a massive wave of Zerg was headed straight for them. As she sends out the distress call, however, Menks overrules any orders to send help, instead signaling that the Sons of Korhal are to leave Tarsonis. Raynor chastises Menks for leaving Kerrigan behind, but Menks merely brushes him off and prepares his flagship, the Hyperion, for warp travel away from the system. Kerrigan would send out another call for evacuation before her communications would go silent. Kerrigan and her forces would be torn apart by the Zerg, and the swarm would have free reign over the planet. The Terran Confederacy had fallen beneath the swarm, and across the surface of Tarsonis, the Zerg battled the remaining Protoss forces and Sons of Korhal still on the planet, and the last of the Confederates. It would be months before the fighting ceased, with Zerg supremacy over the scarred world. With the Confederacy's fall, a power vacuum existed, and one Menks wished to take advantage of to build his own great empire. Calling together his inner circle, he welcomes them into this new era, but Raynor, still stuck on Tarsonis, calls out Menks for abandoning Kerrigan, provoking him. Raynor and the Magistrate would defect from the Sons of Korhal, bringing with them the Marsara colonists, and calling themselves Raynor's Raiders. Infuriated, Menks had Duke activate the ion cannon on Tarsonis to prevent Raynor from leaving the planet. Should he make an escape, the cannon will blow him from the skies, and so Raynor's Raiders fought through the Sons of Korhal and the Alpha Squadron to reach the cannon. After a long-fought battle, the ion cannon was destroyed, allowing the rebels to escape from Tarsonis. Not long ago, the Sons of Korhal had been the idealistic rebels, fighting against the corrupt government. But now, Menks was the law, and Raynor was the one fighting back against his new regime.
Fellow Terrans, I come to you in the wake of recent events to issue a call to reason. Let no human deny the perils of our time. While we battle one another, divided by the petty strife of our common history, the tide of a greater conflict is turning against us, threatening to destroy all that we have accomplished. It is time for us as nations and as individuals to set aside our long-standing feuds and unite. The tides of an unwinnable war are upon us, and we must seek refuge upon higher ground lest we be swept away by the flood. The Confederacy is no more. Whatever semblance of unity and protection it once provided is a phantom, a memory. With our enemies left unchecked, who will you turn to for protection? The devastation wrought by the alien invaders is self-evident. We have seen our homes and communities destroyed by the calculated blows of the Protoss. We have seen firsthand our friends and loved ones consumed by the nightmarish Zerg. Unprecedented and unimaginable though they may be, these are the signs of our time. The time has come, my fellow Terrans, to rally to a new banner. In unity lies strength. Already many of the dissident factions have joined us. Out of the many, we shall forge an indivisible whole, capitulating only to a single throne. And from that throne, I shall watch over you. From this day forward, let no human make war upon any other human. Let no Terran agency conspire against this new beginning, and let no man consort with alien powers. And to all the enemies of humanity, seek not to bar our way, for we shall win through, no matter the cost.
On the world of Korhal, Arcturus Minx delivers his coronation speech to all of the Terrans of the Caprulu sector, having proclaimed himself as the Emperor of the newly formed Terran Dominion. Across the Terrans' history, they have stood divided against one another, but in the wake of the Confederacy's collapse, Minx calls for unity. Without the Confederacy's protection, people will need to look to other powers to save them against the shadow looming over them. The Protoss have devastated entire planets in calculated strikes of awesome power, while the Zerg have infested and tore down entire ecosystems in a single ravenous swarm. Many of the rogue factions have already agreed to peace under a single united banner, to which they will serve under a single throne. And from that throne, Arcturus makes the demands that no man may conspire against this new regime, that no man may conspire with alien powers, and that the enemies of humanity are not to stand in their way. The Zerg are not the mindless creatures the Terrans believe them to be. Unbeknownst to them, the Zerg are bound to an eternal, unyielding entity known as the Overmind. Its will is the Swarm's purpose, and through a rigid, hierarchical structure would send out its psionic will. The greatest commanders are the Cerebrits, who relay orders to Queens, then Overlords, and finally the Swarm itself. The Zerg swarm has evolved by taking in the essence of the creatures it devours and weaving it into its own structure, allowing them to adapt to any environment and situation, which over time has made them into an unstoppable force of nature. Recently, the Overmind has awakened a new Cerebrit, whose sole purpose is to protect a growing chrysalis. Within it, a unique creature was captured and is being reformed to become the greatest of the Overmind's agents, and thus its survival is tied to our new Cerebrits. The Cerebrits were constructed using the blueprints of the first Zerg parasites that existed on their ancient homeworld. Each Cerebrit has been given a unique role within the swarm, and even personalities to help them fulfill their function. As their role in the swarm is so important, the Overmind has made a promise to each one. Should a Cerebrit's body be destroyed, their flesh will be reconstructed, and their minds will live on, granting them virtual immortality. Now that the newly birthed Cerebrit has grown large enough to endure warp travel, the Overmind requests that it and the chrysalis are to relocate to the central hive on the planet Char. Leaving their current planet will be no easy task, as the Protoss lie in orbit. Two other Cerebrits, Dagoth and Zaz, answer the Overmind's call, with Dagoth sending specialized Hydralisks called Hunter Killers to assist in clearing a platform high in orbit. Once the platform is cleared, a rift is opened in space, allowing the Zerg to flee the broken world of Tarsonis and return to the safety of Char. The being within the chrysalis has grown powerful, and yet it is only a shadow of its full potential. Now that it lies on Char, it has sent powerful psionic emanations out into space, directed at Minsk. Sent to the volcanic world as General Duke to find its source. As they approached Char, Zaz intercepted Duke's transmission to his forces and alerted the Overmind. The Cerebrit would breed a force large enough to strike out at the Alpha Squadron, and while they were warned that there may be Zerg lurking around the area, they would be severely unprepared for the force that descended upon them. Without any other choice, Duke called for his forces to retreat, and Zaz calls out for the Cerebrit not to give chase. Dagoth's Tiamat brood would instead deal with the Terrans, while the Cerebrit found a more secure location for the chrysalis. Yet as the being within grows stronger, images flash through its mind of Char, and of the swarm seated on the planet. This time, as its mind reached out across the stars, a single name was broadcast: Jimmy. While Dagoth's forces are kept occupied by Duke, more Terrans have arrived on Char. Raynor, sensing something calling out to him, led his forces to the planet in search of what it was, warning his men that while there is certain to be Zerg in the area, the Alpha Squadron may also be prowling around. Even as the Terrans move closer to the Cerebrite's base, searching for whatever it is they came to find, the Overmind reminds it that the chrysalis must be protected at all costs, especially now that it is so close to hatching. It has grown large and it quivers violently as it prepares for its rebirth into the swarm. At last, the creature within bursts forth, unveiling its twisted form. While within its cocoon, its bones were broken and rebuilt, and its flesh was molded and reconstructed into a monstrous creature. Once where there was Sarah Kerrigan, now stands only the Queen of Blades. Having awoken from her slumber, the Overmind sends Kerrigan to deal with the nearby Terrans, ordering her to leave none alive. Gleefully, she sets to the task, taking control of the nearby Zerg and moving to destroy them. Raynor's men stood no chance against Kerrigan's army, which she led from the front lines. Standing with her brood of Zerglings, Hydralisks, and Mutalisks, she ripped apart the Terrans and infested their base, turning any left within into mindless zombies. When she finally found Raynor, she briefly ceased her forces' grim work, allowing them a moment to communicate. Seeing her now, Raynor asks if that truly is Sarah standing before him. Kerrigan has become far more than what she once was. Within the chrysalis, she called out to Mengsk and Raynor for aid, but now she belongs to the Zerg and has no intention of returning to what she once was. Since Raynor is not a threat, she gives him the chance to run away with his tail between his legs, an offer with no other option than to accept. Although the Cerebrite's purpose has been fulfilled, Kerrigan requests that it continues to watch over her so that she may better aid the swarm. The full extent of her psionic abilities are still locked away, and so she wishes to investigate the science vessel and look into the Confederacy's abandoned ghost projects. Zaz reminds her she is still only a servant of the Overmind, but the Overmind reassures it that Kerrigan has been left with her spirit intact and that the Overmind's will is her will. Accompanied by Dagoth's hunter-killers, Kerrigan boards the Amerigo. The science vessel was deployed in orbit around Char by the Alpha Squadron, and hidden somewhere within its depths lies the information Kerrigan wants. The scientists aboard stood little chance against Kerrigan, and the Alpha Squadron Marine stationed there were eviscerated. The data hidden away in their database would be found, and after downloading it and combing through it, Kerrigan undoes the conditioning performed on her during the experiments, further sharpening her psionic powers.
this place?
Only if we see a Zerg.
Yeah, I got your Zerg right here.
The Protoss are on Char, and according to Kerrigan, they have been for a while. She contacts their leader, Tassadar, and calls him a fool for coming to Char, finding that his powers have weakened since Tarsonis. Tassadar, on the other hand, rebukes that he is not one for flaunting his own power, and provokes Kerrigan into hunting him down. Zaz senses something strange about him, and asks Kerrigan to reconsider the attack. Kerrigan, done with Zaz questioning her motives and authority, threatens him into silence, and destroys the nearby Protoss base. As Tassadar is nowhere to be found, she calls him out for letting his underlings do the fighting for him. In response, Tassadar challenges Kerrigan to a one-on-one fight at the middle of a large plateau, though when Kerrigan arrives, it is only an illusion. Kerrigan taunts Tassadar that he is too much of a coward to come and face her, but Tassadar, calm as ever, points out that Kerrigan, being so predictable, is her own worst enemy. While Kerrigan was chasing Tassadar, Zaz was struck down and killed. Kerrigan points out it is a pity the Cerebrits cannot truly die, and that the Overmind should be reincarnating him soon, but according to Dagoth, this is not the case. The Protoss have discovered a way to not only completely destroy a Cerebrit, but also halt the Overmind itself. Without Zaz to keep it in check, the Garm brood has begun to run feral, and has become a danger to itself and the greater hive cluster on Char. As they cannot wait for the Overmind to reawaken and deal with the situation, Dagoth and the Cerebrit must address the situation immediately. Dagoth will deal with the remaining Protoss forces, while the Cerebrit must cull the Garm brood. The Garm brood was specialized for guerrilla tactics, and relied on surprise to throw the enemy into a state of chaos. Without their ruling will, however, the brood has become mindless, and is quickly eradicated by the Cerebrit before it can do further damage. The Overmind has reawakened, and has learned much from the death of Zaz. The Protoss Dark Templar wield energy similar to the Overmind's, and used that to slay the Cerebrit. Yet when the assassin Zeratul committed the act, his mind briefly connected with the Overmind's, revealing his every secret. Of most interest is the location of the Protoss homeworld of Aiur. To prevent the Dark Templar from causing more harm, Kerrigan would flush them out of hiding, and into the waiting arms of the Cerebrit. The Dark Templar were caught like flies in a web as they were cut down, and the Protoss bases destroyed. Still, Tassadar and Zeratul were nowhere to be found. The expeditionary force sent out by the Protoss Conclave into the Kaprulu sector was virtually wiped out, with only Tassadar, Zeratul, and a small fleet being all that remained. While Kerrigan remained behind, the Overmind, unwilling to wait, led the bulk of its forces through a warp rift to conquer Aiur. The hour of victory is at hand. As once Aiur has been claimed for the Swarm, they shall assimilate the Protoss into themselves and become perfect beings. But before the Overmind may manifest on the planet, the way must be paved, and the first step is in seizing the Kadaran crystals from the Protoss. A large Kadaran crystal formation can be found on the planet, guarded by the vanguard of Aiur. The Swarm would need to not only carve through the Protoss defenses to get to the crystal, but as the harvesting process took a prolonged period of time, they would also need to protect the harvesting drone from the Protoss. Still, the Cerebrate would not fail the Overmind, and a shard of the crystal formation would be collected and returned to the Zerg hive. With it in hand, the Overmind turned its attention to the second requirement to begin Aiur's invasion. Not far from the Swarm's hive on Aiur lies hallowed ground, upon which is built a sacred temple. Although the Overmind itself has existed for countless millennia, the temple is far older. Long ago, great beings known as the Xel'Naga created the Overmind and the Zerg Swarm, and they constructed the temple where they first set foot on the world of Aiur. Only there can the Overmind manifest itself, and so the temple must be destroyed and the Kadaran crystal put in its place. The Xel'Naga temple has become a holy site for the Protoss, and so the vanguard of Aiur entrenched themselves around it, determined to fend off the Zerg. Yet the Swarm would break through their defenses and destroy the temple. Enraged, the Protoss launched an all-out offensive to drive the Zerg from the temple ruins, but it would not be enough. The Kadaran crystal would be placed upon the plateau, and the Overmind would relish in its moment of triumph. The events set into motion long ago have finally come to pass. Long before the Overmind, long before the Zerg, and long before the Protoss, there were the Xel'Naga, great gods that seeded life on countless worlds. The first of their creations were the Protoss, gifted with purity of form and vast psionic potential. The second of their creations were the Zerg, gifted with purity of essence, and the ability to adapt to any situation put before them. Both the Protoss and the Zerg are two sides of the same coin, and the Overmind's sole purpose was to assimilate the Protoss into the Swarm, combining purity of form and purity of essence. Only when the two races were made as one would they be perfect. With the temple site cleared, a large meteor crashed down onto Aiur, and the Zerg Swarm swept across the planet. From the site of the crash, atop the ruins of the Xel'Naga temple, the titanic and horrific form of the Overmind arose upon its throne. As the Swarm rages across Aiur, Artanis, our only named player character across the campaign, is promoted to Executor, with Judicator Aldaris of the Protoss Conclave serving as his advisor. The previous Executor, Tassadar, disobeyed the Conclave's orders to burn the Terran world to prevent the Zerg infestation, and has been deemed a deserter. Of the utmost priority is strengthening the defenses against the Zerg, and so Artanis is sent out with a small force to the outpost of Antioch to reinforce it. Once they arrive, Artanis meets with an old friend, Praetor Phoenix, and the two defend the crumbling base from the Zerg. Once Antioch is secured, they look to the surrounding province. Just to the north lies a Zerg hive, and so Phoenix leads the counterattack, burning the hive cluster to the ground and reclaiming the region for the Conclave. Tassadar makes contact with Aldaris and Artanis, informing them that while the Conclave requested Tassadar to return home, he was compelled by a psionic call to visit the planet Char, where he met with the Dark Templar. Among them was the prelate Zeratul, and from him Tassadar learned of the Swarm's command structure, and that striking down the Cerebrats was key to defeating the Zerg. Despite Aldaris' concerns that the Dark Templar heretics were already tainting Tassadar's mind, Phoenix and Artanis decided to test Tassadar's theory. The nearby Balrog brood was controlled by a Cerebrat named Gorn, and by luring out the Zerg with a frontal assault, Phoenix would be able to surprise Gorn from behind. Their plan worked perfectly, and the pincer attack allowed Phoenix to overwhelm Gorn's defenses and tear the Cerebrat apart. With the one controlling the local swarm dead, Phoenix remained behind to observe what would become of the Balrog brood, while Artanis returned to the Citadel and awaited further orders. Despite the damage dealt to it, Gorn would be reincarnated and moves to attack Antioch once more. Tassadar's advice, it would seem, was merely meant to interfere with the Conclave's efforts, and so Aldaris brands him as a traitor. Slaying a defenseless Cerebrat is no way for a warrior of the Templar caste to act, and so Artanis would instead lead their forces against the Zerg hives directly at the province of Sion, while Phoenix remained to guard Antioch. Two major hive clusters lay within Sion, and Artanis would lead the bulk of their forces against them. The hive clusters would be ruthlessly purged from the area, but at the moment of victory, Phoenix called out for aid. Antioch was being overrun, but rather than diverting any forces to help, Aldaris simply orders Phoenix to hold out for as long as possible. Phoenix and his garrison would crumble under the swarm's attack. Despite the heavy blow, the Conclave would assert that the Protoss were winning the war against the Zerg, and it would not be long until Aiur was theirs once again. With the Zerg threat under control, the greatest threat to the Protoss is the rogue Tassadar, who has fallen to the corruption of the Dark Templar. Aboard the ship the Gantrathor, Artanis is sent to Char to arrest Tassadar and bring him back to Aiur for his crimes, before the heretic can spread the Dark Templar's tainted influence. Upon arriving, Tassadar is found working with Jim Raynor, which appalls Aldaris. Tassadar has fallen so low as to consort with humans, but Tassadar points out that while Aiur is actively under siege, they are diverting their forces to arrest him instead. The Zerg began to block the path back to the warp point, and so Artanis took command of all available forces to cut their way back through. Rather than returning to Aiur, Artanis agrees to help Tassadar find Zeratul, who has gone missing somewhere on Char. It is only through the energies of the Dark Templar that the Cerebrats can be permanently killed, and so they will need Zeratul's help if they stand any chance of saving Aiur. When the Xel'Naga left Aiur, the many Protoss tribes entered a bloody civil war that lasted over millennia. This dark period of the Protoss' history was known as the Aeon of Strife, which only ended when the warring tribes joined a psionic link through which their every thought and emotion was open to all others. This link, called the Kala, became the basis of the Protoss philosophy and religion, and those that linked up with it became the Kalai. Society restructured itself to the ruling Judicator caste led by the Conclave, the artisan Kalai caste, and the warrior Templar caste. There were those that believed that existing within the Kala robbed them of their individuality, and so they severed the nerve cords that connected them to it. These rogue bands would be branded as heretics and banished from Aiur. These were the Nerazim, or Dark Templar, and would find a new home on the planet Shakuras. Over time, prejudices would form, and the Nerazim would be seen as traitors to their own race. Artanis has now openly defied the will of the Conclave, and Eldaris attempts to convince him that attempting to rescue Zeratul is the wrong decision. The Judicator condemns Tassadar for not only damning himself, but those who follow him as well, even bringing up that the failed assault to kill the Cerebrit was done via Tassadar's recommendation, further proving Tassadar as a traitor. Turning away from the communications, Artanis and Tassadar set their eyes on a nearby Dominion installation. The Zerg surrounding the installation would be trouble enough on their own, but the Alpha Squadron also reside in the area. General Duke, not content to let Protoss forces freely enter into his airspace, sends a fleet of wraiths to shoot them from the skies, but Tassadar's forces do their best to avoid a direct confrontation, instead focusing on clearing out the Zerg. Once the Zerg around the installation are dealt with, Tassadar, along with 2 Zealots as an escort, quickly make their way inside.
Hey, Sergeant! Sarge! Hey!
You will immediately tell me why you have called me from my desk, Private.
Protoss unit, Sarge! Coming through the South Pass! It looks broke!
Kill it!
Within the Terran installation, Zerg have begun to infest the dark and cramped hallways. Fearing Zeratul may be in danger, Tassadar, along with his escorts, cautiously begin to search the dark halls. Raynor's men, still trapped inside, can also be found. Some of them can be rescued, agreeing to aid Tassadar in his search, but others have suffered a far worse fate. Infested with the Zerg virus, the remaining Terrans have been reduced to little more than living bombs that hurl themselves at the invaders. After fighting through Zerg ambushes, well-hidden infested Terrans, and Dragoon pathing algorithms, Tassadar comes across a hall of holding cells filled with Zerg, which open up and allow their hold to spill forth. Only a few make it through the slaughter, but in one of the holding cells is Zeratul and his Dark Templar. Though Zeratul is initially hesitant, Tassadar urges him to return to Aiur and save their people. In the end, the decision was already made, as even if the Dark Templar were banished from Aiur, they never forgot their homeworld, and never stopped fighting from the shadows to protect it. Tassadar, Zeratul, and Artanis would return to Aiur and would be approached by Phoenix. Following the Battle of Antioch, Phoenix's broken body was recovered and put into the robotic shell of a Dragoon so he may fight once more. But against the Conclave's will, Phoenix sides with Tassadar and warns them of the Conclave's decision to arrest Tassadar for treason and execute Zeratul. To protect the remaining Protoss from the Conclave's blindness, Tassadar orders his forces to Korshakal, where a civil war broke out. Eldaris demanded their surrender, but Tassadar would press the attack, and with the combined might of those loyal to Tassadar and the Dark Templar following Zeratul, they would march into Korshakal and burn it to the ground, killing those of the Conclave settled there. but the sight would prove too much for Tassadar. Watching Protoss fighting Protoss pained him too much, and so he would willingly turn himself over to Aldaris, if only so that the fighting would cease. He urged Artanis to continue resisting the Zerg while the Dark Templar fled the scene into hiding. Zeratul and the Dark Templar are nowhere to be found, so it is up to Artanis and Phoenix to save Tassadar. Held in a stasis chamber to await his trial, Tassadar was nothing but a heretic in the eyes of the Conclave. Having spent a lot of time with the Dark Templar, he had learned to harness the Nerazim's energies alongside that of the Kala, becoming an exceptionally powerful being. Phoenix and Artanis saw Tassadar as the only hope for stopping the Zerg threat, and assistance would come from high in orbit. Raynor, having commandeered the Hyperion from Mengsk, warps to Aiur to assist in freeing Tassadar. The two had become friends on Char when Tassadar helped to save his men, and Raynor would not be content to let the Zerg claim total dominion. The three of them combined their forces and made their way across the canyon to where Tassadar was being held. Although the area was heavily defended, with arbiters hindering their efforts significantly, they would manage to punch a hole through the enemy base and reach the High Templar. With the stasis cell destroyed, Tassadar is freed once more, but expecting Artanis and Phoenix to attempt to free the heretic, Aldaris planted forces around the area. Once Tassadar had been freed, Aldaris' forces warp in and surround the traitors, waiting for Aldaris to give the order, but they too would be caught by surprise. Zeratul was not sitting idly by, but instead waiting for the moment to strike. Now that they had Aldaris surrounded, Zeratul asks him if he is truly so blinded by his religious zealotry that he cannot see what is happening around him. The Conclave believes they are winning the war with the Zerg, but all they have managed to accomplish is usher in the Overmind's rule. Zeratul himself has traveled the distant stars in search of knowledge. He has borne witness to the birth of negative suns and witnessed the deaths of entire realities. The Conclave is but a fleeting dream, and soon they will awaken to find themselves surrounded by a nightmare. Aldaris and the remaining Conclave would retreat, allowing Tassadar to escape with his rescuers. In order to truly defeat the Zerg, the Overmind itself would need to be destroyed, but it had surrounded itself with several powerful broods. This, Zeratul reasoned, would be the monster's undoing. By slaying the two Cerberats stationed nearby, not only would Tassadar and his allies have a clear path to the Overmind, but the deaths of the two Cerberats should stun the creature long enough for them to kill it. Phoenix offered himself up to lead the attack against the two Cerberats and clear the path for Zeratul. During their mission, Zeratul reveals just what he had learned the last time he killed a Cerebrit. Upon the death of Zaz, Zeratul and the Overmind's minds connected, and Zeratul witnessed the Overmind's plans for their race. He saw the Overmind's creation at the hands of the Xel'Naga, and how it had come to Aiur to assimilate the Protoss, ascending to godhood itself. For the fate of not just Aiur, but all of creation, their plans must succeed. Phoenix and Zeratul would fight their way through the Tiamat, Balrog, and Grendel broods, ultimately slaying Gorn and an unnamed Cerebrit. Their deaths would severely wound the Overmind as Tassadar pressed his forces towards the crash site. Tassadar, Zeratul, Phoenix, and Raynor established themselves around the great bulk of the Overmind. The battle ahead would be a difficult one, but if they failed, death would be a blessing. They would be contacted by Aldaris on behalf of what little of the Conclave still remained. Having witnessed the deaths of the Cerebrits, they have seen it was a mistake to have persecuted Tassadar. Although the Conclave would not send any military assistance to aid Tassadar, they would no longer stand in his way. Even if the Overmind was stunned for the moment, its great bulk was defended by several powerful hive clusters, which would fight tooth and claw to defend the core of their hive mind. The combined Terran and Protoss forces would burn their way through, laying waste to the Zerg defenses. Whatever damage they dealt to the Overmind itself would be superficial, and nothing it wouldn't be able to heal through, but it served to weaken the beast even further. The Protoss and Terran forces surrounding the Overmind had suffered heavy losses, and with the Zerg regrouping from their initial attack, it seemed unlikely they could maintain their offensive long enough to strike the killing blow. Tassadar, piloting the Gantrathor, bid farewell to his friends and allies. As a last act of sacrifice, he would channel the powers of the Dark Templar and the Kalai into the ship's hull and set a collision course with the Overmind. Mutalisks and Scourge attempted to stop the ship, and though the Gantrathor suffered heavy damage, they failed to stop it. The Overmind, now awakened, attempted to open a warp rift above itself to escape from the attack, but before it could flee, the Gantrathor tore itself apart and slammed into the monster. The Overmind would be destroyed by the energies of the void channeled into it, and pieces of its mass would be sucked through the portal. When at last the lights died down, the corpse of the Overmind fell silent. The overriding will of the swarm was no more. Victory for the survivors of the battle was a hollow one. They had succeeded in killing the Overmind, but now they were stuck on Aiur, surrounded by Zerg. Without the Overmind giving them commands, the swarm began to rampage across the planet's surface, destroying everything in their path. Few of the Protoss remained from the recent events of the Zerg invasion and the civil war between Tassadar and the Conclave, but it was clear that their problems were far from over. Their great civilization had fallen, and their homeworld was now lost, claimed by the mindless Zerg. The Overmind's death was felt across the galaxy, as on Char, now freed of the beast's influence on her mind, Kerrigan was once again in control. Looking out across the stars, she knew that the time of her ascension had come.